Starfield, the game we've all been waiting for. For decades now, gamers have dreamed of a game where you can explore an entire galaxy and live out your own Star Wars-inspired space opera where the only limitations are your own imagination. Starfield promises to live up to a lot of those dreams. However, with some somewhat mixed reviews and some controversial claims, leaks, reactions, and videos, you're probably left wondering, is Starfield really for you? Well, hopefully in today's video, I can help you answer that question. So let's jump into it. So first of all, I want to clarify, this isn't a review. The point of this video is to help you decide if you think this game is something you'll enjoy. I'm not going to do this by breaking down every last piece of gameplay and analyzing every last part of the game. I'm just going to be talking about my personal opinion about the game and trying to just let you guys know without spoiling anything what you can expect from Starfield, because I feel like a lot of expectations are kind of out of control about this game. And the way I'm going to help you make this decision is based on my 30-ish hours of gameplay of the game so far, my hundreds of hours in Bethesda RPGs previously, and also my hundreds of hours in space sim games. I feel like I'm the perfect target audience for this game as an enjoyer of both of those things, and I feel like there's a pretty good chance if you're watching this video that you are too. So hopefully you'll be able to relate to what I'm saying, which will hopefully help you make a decision.
Everyone has a choice. Some are simply more difficult than others.
Okay, now that's out of the way, let's cut to the chase and get to what I think is the most important point I want to make in this video, which is that if you love Bethesda RPGs, you will love Starfield. There may be a load of new bells and whistles and various ways the game is different to previous games, but ultimately, this is a Bethesda RPG through and through. And while some of the new features, like the ship and space travel and stuff, might be a little jarring at first and make you feel like maybe the game has somehow lost something from other Bethesda RPGs, it hasn't. If you love that style of gameplay and storytelling and characters, and all of the awesome side quests and emergent gameplay you get from Bethesda games, you will love this game. In fact, because of the sheer scale of this game, there is more of the traditional Bethesda stuff to love in Starfield than ever before. If you're somebody that loves Bethesda RPGs, but maybe you're not sold on some of the new mechanics, then you should know that once you get used to it, the new mechanics do not get in the way at all. In fact, everything to do with the ship, aside from space combat and the docking mechanics, and the occasional conversation with an NPC ship, is just kind of an advanced fast travel. And while some of the new features like shipbuilding or base building, and perhaps even some of the ship combat, may confuse you a little bit at first, after a few hours, you will get to grips with these mechanics and it will all become second nature. And once they do, you'll feel right at home, just like you're exploring the Wasteland or Tamriel. However, if you dislike Bethesda RPGs, then most likely this game is not for you. Sure, there is a bunch of new stuff. The space travel, the ship combat, the ship building, which is really deep, and the most advanced base building we've had in a Bethesda game so far. But the vast majority of the gameplay, especially when it comes to beating the main quest, is traditional Bethesda RPG gameplay with lots of conversations with NPCs and RPG-based combat. Speaking of the combat, there's never been a Bethesda RPG that's felt more like a first-person shooter, and depending on your perspective, you could describe the way combat feels as being either a really dumbed down Doom Eternal or Fallout 4 on steroids, because in reality it lands somewhere in between, and this is still an RPG, so all the damage values you do are still based on various stats on your weapons and character. It doesn't quite feel like a highly refined first-person shooter experience, but with some tweaking of the settings and sensitivity, players with thousands of hours in first-person shooters will feel pretty comfortable with Starfield. And although the gunplay does fall short of something like a Destiny, it does feel fantastic And of course, this game isn't just about the gunplay. There's so much more going on. There's a huge epic galaxy to explore with 1,000 planets, an epic storyline, tons of side quests, and tons of crafting to be had. And I would say that overall, the gameplay experience is excellent. And personally, I'm enjoying the combat in this game much more than any other Bethesda RPG in the past. But despite all of the new additions and improvements, there is no getting away from the fact that this is a traditional Bethesda RPG, and depending on who you are, that will either be a really, really good thing if you're a fan of those games, or a really bad thing if you're not. I personally am, so I'm loving the game. But if you're somebody that really doesn't like any of the other Bethesda RPGs, I just don't think there's enough new stuff to win you over. Now, maybe if you're on the fence and perhaps you don't hate Bethesda RPGs and you're a massive science fiction fan, then perhaps it could be worth it, because it is an incredible science fiction universe that Bethesda has created that may be worth a shot if you're somebody that's always been curious about Bethesda games but never really pulled the trigger. And in case anyone is wondering, out of all the Bethesda games, Starfield does feel a lot more like a Fallout game than an Elder Scrolls game. Before we start to wrap up with some of my personal highlights about the game, I want to briefly go over a load of topics that I know you guys are going to be interested in if you're considering picking up Starfield. First up is planets. I know there's a lot of talk about planets being empty and how it all works, and I just want to say that planets, in my experience, do not feel empty whatsoever. Typically, when you land on a planet and you start to explore, if you use the scanner, you find lots of points of interest. Almost every point of interest contains some sort of loot. It might even be some kind of abandoned factory overrun by space pirates with a bunch of enemies there to clear out. There's a bunch of different types of outposts. There's caves, there's geological anomalies, there's biological anomalies, all kinds of stuff. And sometimes you even encounter NPCs that'll give you new quests. I've never naturally bumped into any of the invisible walls that apparently exist, and I've not once run out of things to do on a planet before being led somewhere else on a side quest or a main quest. So planets are very detailed with lots to do, and in my experience, you're only going to bump into an invisible wall or end up somewhere barren if you're really looking for it. The experience is super immersive and fun and has a really great sense of adventure. I also want to talk about the space sim elements. Yes, the experience is not seamless like in an Elite Dangerous or a Star Citizen, where you can go from walking on the surface of a planet all the way to traveling to a different star system with no loading screens or no transitions or anything. In Starfield, you mostly navigate the universe via your star map. If you're on the surface of a planet and you want to go to another one, you just bring up the map, select the planet you want to go to, and as long as it's within range, there'll be an animation of you taking off, and then you'll just arrive in orbit around the planet. So the aspect of traveling between systems is not very space sim-like, and neither is the mechanics around landing and taking off on a planet. However, while you are flying around in space in the orbit of a planet, the flight mechanics and the space combat is actually surprisingly detailed. Deciding which system to assign more power to, being able to lock on to specific parts of an enemy ship, being able to control your thrusters, and even dock and board an enemy ship mid-battle to take it over and steal the ship, all actually feel very realistic, very detailed, and actually in many ways are totally comparable to a space sim. And the thing is, compared to a space sim, many of those games require some really expensive controllers and joysticks to really feel the full effect. Whereas one thing Starfield nails is that the controls on both mouse and keyboard with a little rebinding and on controller actually strike a really good balance of feeling like you have a lot of control over a lot of systems on your ship and being pretty easy to use. It's a little complicated at first, but I think as a mouse and keyboard player, this is actually the best space combat I've ever had with a mouse and keyboard. Before moving on from the space sim topic, I just want to say that even if it was possible for Starfield to be totally seamless when it comes to taking off and landing on planets and traveling to different systems, I don't really think that that would actually work for this kind of game. Star Citizen and Elite are very specific kinds of games, much more centered around the flight model. In Starfield, we're always zipping around the universe doing quests all over the place, and it's super common to have to grab a quest on one planet, travel halfway across the galaxy, and come back to hand it in. And I think it would actually be very impractical if it was totally seamless. And whilst it may add to the level of immersion and improve the gameplay of the flight model, I think it would actually come at the expense of trashing the gameplay of the RPG and quest grind. So even though it may seem a little bit unusual and disjointed at first, I ultimately think that the way Starfield works is ultimately for the better for this kind of game, even though I would have liked to have seen a little bit more immersion. When it comes to bugs and performance, it's obviously something we've come to expect with the launch of Bethesda games, but I have to say, after playing for 30 hours, I experienced no bugs, and the performance of the game overall has been great. Easily the best running and least buggy Bethesda game I have ever played at release, although I will admit that towards the end of my session, I did encounter one bug where there was some chests floating in the air randomly, but that is literally it after exploring tons of planets and doing tons of quests and playing for tons of hours. By modern AAA standards these days, the game runs great and seems rock solid bug wise. I've seen some random criticism about the writing of the dialogue somehow not being up to par. I think this just seems completely made up to me. I don't know where that's coming from. I totally just feel the same way that I usually do when playing a Bethesda game. Lots of the writing is very endearing and fun and light-hearted. Maybe it's not the best in gaming ever, sure, but I definitely feel like it's totally up to par with other Bethesda games. I've seen some random criticisms of the graphics that again, to me, just seem totally made up. I don't know where that's coming from. The graphics to my eye are absolutely incredible, and as somebody that frankly doesn't enjoy most AAA games, not only have I been having a blast with Starfield, but I've been blown away by the visuals on several occasions. I did also check out Starfield on Xbox, and I will say I was really surprised by the experience. The FPS on Xbox is locked to 30 FPS, which is really the main difference between PC and Xbox, but honestly it's so rock solid and the motion blur is so subtle. It does a great job at masking the lower FPS, and it being so solid, to be honest, in many ways it felt kind of smoother than my experience playing on PC, where you can get higher FPS, but there's obviously more drastic dips because the FPS is not locked. And whatever preset they're using on the Xbox Series X looks absolutely fantastic. Lastly, before I move on to my highlights, I wanted to mention the price and the value. The main thing I wanted to stress is that this game is in Game Pass. I played the early access version by just upgrading from the Game Pass version, so I got to play the game early for 30 quid instead of 100. I'm sure lots of you guys would rather play this on Steam if you're looking to play on PC, but honestly, this game is a perfect game to try Game Pass with. The version is exactly the same as what you would get on Steam, and if you've not tried Game Pass before, you can actually get it super cheap, and you could easily just get 1 month of Game Pass and beat the single player campaign, providing you have the roughly 70 to 100 hours to spare to do that. Or at the very least, it's a great way to try it out. So the Game Pass value is obviously insane. If you have Game Pass, just get this game, no question. I don't care what kind of games you like, definitely get it if you have Game Pass. If you don't have Game Pass, I would also say if you like Bethesda RPGs, just get Game Pass to try this out. You don't need to commit all that money on Steam, especially if you're unsure. And lastly, look, if you just really don't want to have anything to do with the Xbox ecosystem, including Game Pass, then yeah, you're going to have to buy it on Steam, in which case the game is pretty expensive. So in that scenario, you know, if you're a fan of Bethesda RPGs, that you're going to get a ton of hours out of this game, potentially hundreds, if not thousands. So it's worth whatever the asking price may be. But like I mentioned earlier in the video, if you're not into Bethesda RPGs and you're kind of on the fence about it and you aren't like mega hyped about this game, maybe wait for a sale or consider Game Pass. Alright, last but not least, I want to talk about my personal highlights. First of all, I want to say that the ship builder is completely nuts. I've actually spent hours working on my own ships in this game, trying to make a smaller ship to use as a fighter because it's more agile, and making a larger ship with multiple cargo holds so I can cart around a ton of loot and come and sell it to traders. It is so detailed. This is actually another way that this game is actually way ahead of any space sim I'm aware of for any space nerds out there. So if you're just super into space sims, you really like science fiction games, and maybe you're just excited about the idea of the ship builder, I'll tell you, it's absolutely amazing. The fact that you can have an entire fleet of these ships that are super customized really excites me. Base building is also incredible. Super detailed detailed. It looks amazing. You can build a compound that totally could have been handmade by Bethesda. As I mentioned before, the ship combat is also amazing. One of my personal highlights is stealing ships off any pirates that attack me, doing some counter piracy and getting some free ships in the process. Super fun. I also enjoy doing a lot of trading, just looting a bunch of items and making a bunch of money by filling up my cargo hold and selling it off. And last but not least is just the Bethesda emergent gameplay magic of just some random fun NPC showing up or interacting with a random computer console to have it trigger some crazy robot do something totally unpredictable and fun. All of which are things that have happened in my gameplay so far.
Is being a ship captain non-stop thrills and excitement like living in that movie Return of the Interceptor?
Alright guys, that's just about going to do it for this video. I hope you found it useful and I hope it helped you figure out whether or not you think Starfield is for you. If you enjoyed the video or you did find it useful, please don't forget to leave a like and a nice positive comment for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for future content, and let me know if you'd like to see more Starfield content because I'm super excited about this game and I'm really excited about the idea of making more videos about it too. If you want to support the content directly, then you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/NickRawcliffe, so I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in that. I do stream live on this very YouTube channel. I'm actually in the midst of streaming a Starfield playthrough live on Twitch at the minute as well, so I'll leave a link in the description to my Twitch channel if you're interested in that. You can follow me on social media and join my Discord at the links below, and until next time, have a good one.